Your mom could make a dessert that would silence a table of 6 for a full 5 minutes using ingredients that cost less than $1. No stand mixer, no parchment paper, no expensive extracts, just a box of pudding, a bag of cookies, and 20 minutes of time. And somehow, those desserts tasted better than anything sitting behind glass in a bakery today. These recipes didn't disappear because they weren't good enough. They disappeared because somewhere along the way, people were convinced that cooking meant buying more, spending more, and needing more. Convenience took over, and in the process, something simple and powerful was lost. There was a time when dessert didn't come from a store. It came from memory, instinct, and whatever was already sitting in the kitchen. A handful of pantry staples could turn into something unforgettable. No-bake chocolate oatmeal cookies were one of those desserts. Sugar, milk, butter, and cocoa came together in a quick boil, and then oats, peanut butter, and vanilla were stirred in. Dropped by the spoonful and left to set, they filled the air with the smell of chocolate in minutes. The difference between perfection and failure was just 60 seconds of boiling time. Too little, and they stayed soft. Too long, and they crumbled. That tiny window was everything, and everyone who made them knew it. Watergate salad was another creation that didn't need explanation to be loved. A mix of pistachio pudding, whipped topping, crushed pineapple, and marshmallows came together in minutes. Its bright green color looked almost unreal, but that only made it more exciting. It showed up at cookouts, potlucks, and family gatherings, always in a large bowl, always disappearing faster than expected. It wasn't fancy, but it didn't need to be. It was reliable, affordable, and impossible to ignore. Some desserts demanded patience, and that patience changed the way they tasted. Tapioca pudding wasn't rushed. It sat on the stove, slowly thickening as someone stood there stirring, paying attention. The small pearls softened into a smooth, glossy mixture that felt completely different from anything instant. Left to chill overnight, it turned into something cool and silky, a quiet reward for the time spent making it. It wasn't just about the final result. It was about the process, the waiting, and the care. Brown Betty came from a mindset where nothing was wasted. Stale bread, sliced apples, brown sugar, and spices were layered together and baked until the top turned crisp and the inside stayed soft. The breadcrumbs absorbed the juices, creating a texture that was both crunchy and tender at the same time. It filled the house with warmth, not just from the oven, but from the feeling of making something out of almost nothing. Ambrosia salad lived somewhere between a dessert and a fruit dish, but it didn't matter what category it belonged to. It was made with canned fruit, coconut, marshmallows, and cream, chilled until everything softened and blended together. It carried a sweetness that felt slightly different, almost tropical, something that stood out on a table full of familiar flavors. It showed up at holidays and gatherings without fail, like a tradition no one questioned. Then there was pineapple upside-down cake, a dessert that felt like a performance. Butter and sugar melted together in a pan, pineapple rings were arranged carefully, and cherries were placed right in the center. Batter was poured over everything, and after baking, the entire cake was flipped in one confident motion. What came out looked completely transformed, glossy fruit on top, golden cake underneath. It was simple, but it looked like something far more complicated. Some recipes didn't even need an oven. Icebox cakes relied on time instead of heat. Layers of crackers and whipped cream were stacked and left in the refrigerator overnight. By morning, the crackers softened into a texture that felt just like cake. It was a quiet transformation, one that rewarded patience instead of effort. Every hour it sat made it better, and that waiting became part of the experience. Dump cake had a name that didn't inspire much confidence, but the result told a different story. Fruit was spread in a dish, dry cake mix was poured over it, butter was layered on top, and then everything baked together without being mixed. The top turned golden and crisp, while the fruit bubbled underneath. It was messy, uneven, and absolutely perfect in its own way. Layered desserts like lemon lush brought together different textures in one dish. A crumbly base, a smooth cream layer, a bright pudding layer, and a soft topping created something that looked as good as it tasted. Each bite carried contrast, and that contrast made it memorable. It didn't require advanced skills, just a willingness to assemble and wait. Then came the shift. Convenience products started replacing these methods. Ready-made toppings, boxed mixes, instant puddings. They promised speed and ease, and they delivered. But they also changed something deeper. Desserts became less about making something and more about assembling something that was already halfway done. The skill didn't disappear overnight, but it slowly faded into the background. Dirt pudding captured something different entirely. It wasn't about elegance, it was about fun. Crushed cookies layered with pudding and topped with gummy worms turned dessert into something playful. It wasn't just eaten, it was remembered. The kind of dessert that stayed in someone's mind for years, tied to a specific place, a specific moment. Banana pudding, the real version, told a different story. It required attention. Custard had to be stirred until it thickened just right. Layers had to be built carefully. Meringue had to be whipped and browned. It wasn't difficult, but it demanded focus. The result was something warm, soft, and rich in a way that couldn't be rushed. Jello poke cake turned a simple cake into something visually unexpected. Holes were poked across the surface and liquid gelatin was poured over it, sinking into every space. Once set, each slice revealed streaks of color running through the cake. It looked almost experimental, but the taste was familiar and comforting. No-bake cheesecake proved that simplicity could still feel special. Cream cheese, condensed milk, and lemon juice came together in a crust and chilled until firm. It didn't need baking, complicated steps, or precision tools. It just needed time to set, and it delivered something smooth and balanced. Wacky cake challenged expectations completely. No eggs, no butter, no milk. Just simple ingredients mixed together in a pan, with vinegar reacting with baking soda to create lift. It felt unusual, but the result was a perfectly soft chocolate cake that didn't feel like a compromise at all. Oatmeal cake brought texture into focus. The oats softened into the batter, creating something moist and slightly chewy. The topping, caramelized under heat, added a layer of sweetness and crunch that made it stand out. It wasn't flashy, but it stayed memorable long after it was gone. Chocolate cobbler felt almost like a trick. Batter, dry ingredients, and boiling water went into a dish without mixing. In the oven, it separated into a cake layer and a rich sauce beneath. It didn't look like it should work, but it did, every time. Even something like prune cake, often overlooked, had depth. The fruit added moisture and sweetness that turned a simple spice cake into something richer than expected. It stayed soft for days, quietly proving that ingredients didn't need to be expensive to be effective. Tomato soup cake sounded strange, but it worked. The soup added moisture and balance, enhancing the spices and creating a smooth texture. It didn't taste like what it was made from. It tasted better than expected, and that surprise made it memorable. Rice pudding and bread pudding brought everything back to basics. Grains, milk, sugar, and thyme. Bread that might have been thrown away became the base for something warm and comforting. Nothing was wasted, and everything had a purpose. Cherry Delight and applesauce cake showed how a few affordable ingredients could still create something worth sharing. Layers, textures, and flavors came together without complication, proving that simplicity wasn't a limitation. And then there were the layered bars, built without mixing, relying on heat to bring everything together. Ingredients melted, blended, and transformed into something cohesive, something rich, something impossible to forget. At the center of all of this was a single idea. These desserts weren't just about saving money, they were about knowing how to create something from almost nothing. They were about time, attention, and the small details that made a difference. The waiting, the stirring, the layering, the trust in the process. Some of these recipes take minutes, others take patience, but all of them carry something that modern shortcuts often miss. The act of making them changes the result. It changes how they taste, how they feel, and how they're remembered. Pick one. Make it. Watch what happens when something simple comes together the way it used to.